In 2500, every continent on Earth had sunk underwater after sea levels rose over 7,600 meters. The once beautiful Earth had turned into a water world, a planet filled with only water and no land. Since then, human civilization has been living on atolls, rugged communities that float on water. Meanwhile, some had become drifters, some smokers, and some slavers. Slavers are an unseen fraction of the underworld that captures humans and trades them. Meanwhile, smokers are industrialized pirates that attack human civilizations and other drifters to steal their glory and supplies. Drifters, on the other hand, are just mere individuals who travel the endless ocean all on their own, in their own makeshift boats. One of the drifters is the mariner, a nameless man who has gills and webbed feet. After the world got engulfed by the ocean, there was a fluke of evolution that caused mutations in some humans and sea creatures. Aside from having gills and webbed feet, mutants like the mariner can also breathe underwater. This allows him to dive underwater and gather dirt, a rare commodity that he'd trade for other supplies. After gathering dirt from underwater, the mariner visited an atoll to trade the dirt for chits, which is the common currency in the water world. After receiving 62 chits, the mariner visited a store to buy hydro, a term people use for drinking water. That's where the mariner met Helen, a woman who had been taking care of a tattooed girl named Enola. A man named Nord approached the mariner and tried to start a conversation with him. Nord was consistent at first, but after seeing the tattoo on Enola's back, he seemed to have changed his mind about talking to the mariner and walked away. After getting everything he needs, the mariner decides to leave the atoll. But a small disagreement with a group of elders results in the atollers discovering that he's a mutant. The mariner got arrested, and during the night that he was imprisoned, he was approached by Gregor, the elder, who had been helping Helen take care of Ilona. Gregor inquired the mariner about the dry land, a mythological land that they believe still exists somewhere in the endless ocean. The mariner asked Gregor to help him escape, but Gregor refused in fear of getting into trouble. The next day, the enforcer decided to recycle the mariner by drowning him in organic sludge. But the smokers came to ambush the atoll in search of Enola, the only one whom they believed could lead them to dry land. Gregor had managed to escape the ambush with a flying machina he had built but failed to get Helen and Enola. Desperate for an escape, Helen freed the mariner in exchange for him letting them go with him. The mariner agreed, and the three of them boarded his trimaran. The mariner used his rope dart to pull the smokers' boat with a machine gun and destroyed the boat where Deacon, the smokers' leader, was in. The three of them then escaped into the open sea, and Helen asked the mariner if he could bring them to the dry land. The mariner agreed, but only if they left Enola behind, as there weren't enough supplies for the three of them. Helen refused to leave Enola behind, and in a desperate attempt to get the mariner to bring both her and Enola to the dry land, she even offered her body to the mariner, which he refused. Despite the multiple threats he had given the females in his boat, the mariner still let them stay. After just a couple of peaceful days, they were then pursued by the smokers. Helen, who wanted to help, used the mariner's rope dart against the smoker's plane, resulting in the weapon being destroyed. The mariner had managed to fix the mess Helen made, and as a punishment, he cut Helen and Enola's hair. They continued traveling until they stumbled upon a lone drifter who seemed to have lost his right mind after getting stuck in the middle of the ocean. The mariner wanted to trade for food, but the only thing that the drifter gave him was a piece of paper, which is also a rare commodity in the water world. In exchange for the paper, the mariner allowed the drifter to have half an hour of pleasure with Helen. Helen was, of course, distraught by this, but was still unable to do anything else but go inside the boat with the estranged drifter. The drifter took off his top, but before he could do anything to Helen, the mariner had come to kill him. The mariner took everything he could from the drifter's boat and made preparations to get some food. He jumped into the ocean and captured a large mutated shark, which they cooked for food. After this event, the mariner had gotten closer to Helen and Enola. The mariner even taught Enola how to swim while Helen watched them from the boat. One day they came across the barter outpost, also known as a slaver's outpost. The mariner asked the slavers for repairs, but there was no answer. That's when Helen realized that everyone in the outpost was already dead, and the mariner saw the smokers waiting to ambush them from underwater. With quick thinking, the trio managed to escape from the smokers' trap, but the mariner was shot by Deacon. Realizing that the smokers were after Enola, the mariner asked what the meaning of Enola's tattoo was. Helen stated that it was the map to the dry land, and the mariner angrily told them that the dry land wasn't real. To prove his claim, the mariner brought Helen underwater using his makeshift diving bell and showed her the remains of a city beneath the ocean. When they resurfaced, they found the smokers on the mariner's boat, and Enola was nowhere in sight. Cornered, the mariner couldn't do anything as Deacon threatened to kill both of them if they didn't hand over Enola, who was hiding within the boat. Not wanting the mariner and Helen to die, Enola showed herself up and Deacon abducted her before ordering his men to kill the mariner and Helen. The mariner and Helen barely managed to escape by diving underwater, with the mariner breathing into Helen. When they resurfaced again, they saw that the smokers were gone and the mariner's boat was completely destroyed. With nowhere to go and no boat to sail with, the mariner and Helen was helpless on top of the burned boat. The two of them had assumed that they were going to die and spent their time connecting with each other. The mariner checked the boat for anything useful and found Enola's books and drawings. He seemed to have realized something and put all of them in a box. He asked Helen why she believed in the dry land so much, and she answered that it was because they weren't supposed to live on water. They had feet, and they were supposed to walk. Suddenly, Helen heard a familiar voice and looked up to find Gregor. Fortunately, the elder had seen the smoke coming from the burned boat and followed it to find the mariner and Helen. Gregor brought the mariner and Helen to the boat where the other survivors of their atolls are. The mariner told Helen and Gregor about Enola's drawings and books, stating that the dry land was real after all, because he had seen Enola's drawings in person. The mariner decided that he would save Enola from the smokers, with or without the help of the survivors. He left with the jet ski the survivors had stolen from the smokers, and the survivors complained, not wanting the mariner to come back to their boat with Enola, as they believed they would only bring danger to them. The Marines reached the remains of the Exxon Valdez, an oil tanker that the smokers are now using as a residence. He sneaked around as Deacon cheered his people up by showing them Enola and promising that they were going to find the dry land. Once his speech was over, everyone rushed to row the Exxon Valdez, excited to reach the promised dry land. Now that all the other smokers were below the deck to row the huge taker, the mariner showed himself up in front of Deacon and threatened to drop a flare into the oil reservoir. The Deacon was confident, as he stated that the mariner wouldn't do it, because it would also kill both him and Enola. But the mariner proved him wrong by dropping the flare, igniting the oil reservoir, and causing an explosion that killed most of the other smokers. The mariner killed Nord and the remaining smokers before chasing after Deacon, who had abducted Enola. Attaching a rope to an anchor, the mariner used this to prevent Deacon from leaving with Enola. The plane crashed, and he carried Enola away. Meanwhile, Helen followed the mariner with Gregor and the enforcer, using the makeshift hot air balloon. They arrived just in time to save the mariner and Enola from the exploding tanker. But Deacon had also grabbed onto the rope that would bring them up the hot air balloon. So Helen threw something hard that hit his head, and Enola kicked him, causing Deacon to fall into the water. The group watched as the tanker got fully destroyed, and just as they were flying away, Deacon got on a jet ski and shot at the hot air balloon, causing Enola to fall due to the impact. The mariner wrapped a rope around his leg and jumped it out of the hot air balloon. Helen rushed to tie the rope as the mariner successfully grabbed Enola right before Deacon and the two other smokers even got to her. Deacon and the two smokers collided with each other on their jet skis and died due to an explosion. On the hot air balloon, Gregor discovered that the tattoo on Enola's back was actually pointing in reverse directions. They followed the coordinates and traveled for days until they finally found what they were looking for. The mariner woke up and was confused when he saw a seagull. Hearing the flaps of the seagull's wings, everyone else woke up, and there they found the beautiful dry land, which was actually the top of Mount Everest, covered with vegetation and wildlife. The group was so happy, cheering and laughing as they explored dry land, until they found a small hut and discovered the remains of the humans that once lived there. Enola discovered that the remains were her parents, and the crude hut was her home. The mariner, on the other hand, didn't feel like he belonged to the dry land because of his mutation. He built himself a new wooden trimaran, and with a bittersweet farewell to Helen and Enola, he set sail into the ocean, where he felt like he belonged.